The Great Hall on Zentari Prime sparkled like the inside of a diamond. Hundreds of alien beings sat in perfect circles, their voices creating a strange music as they spoke in dozens of different languages. The universal translator worked overtime, turning clicks, whistles, and hums into words everyone could understand. Admiral Vextar stood at the center of it all. His blue skin gleamed under the crystal lights, and his forearms moved gracefully as he spoke. Behind him, a massive screen showed pictures of human ships floating in the darkness of space. "Look at these vessels," Vextar said, his voice carrying easily through the hall. "The humans think these crude machines can travel between stars. They use chemical rockets like children playing with fireworks. Their hulls are made of simple metal, welded together by hand." Laughter rippled through the assembled aliens. Ambassador Kelthrix, whose species had been traveling space for 10,000 years, shook his feathered head. "My people built better ships when we were still learning to walk upright. These humans are barely past throwing rocks at each other." Dr. Zilani adjusted her 6 eyes to focus better on the images. She was the galaxy's best expert on alien technology, and she had studied the humans for months. "Their materials are interesting," she admitted, "but so primitive. They use steel and aluminum like we used to do 50,000 years ago. No quantum bonding, no living metal, no crystal matrices. It's almost cute." The screen changed to show a human shipyard orbiting their home planet. Workers in bulky spacesuits moved slowly through the construction area, literally hammering pieces of metal together. Sparks flew from welding torches as they connected hull plates one by one. "They build like our ancestors did," said Captain Morpheus of the Stellar Union. His tentacles waved in amusement. "Look at them. They actually use tools with their hands. No nano-assemblers, no molecular printers. They cut metal with heat and bash it into shape with hammers." More laughter filled the hall. Even the most peaceful species found the human construction methods amusing. The ethereals, who grew their ships from living crystal, made soft chiming sounds that meant they were highly entertained. Vextar continued his presentation. "Our intelligence shows they have spread to perhaps a dozen star systems. Their fastest ships take years to travel between worlds. They cannot create artificial gravity, so their crews float around inside metal cans, getting sick from the weightlessness." A new image appeared showing human soldiers. They wore thick armor and carried weapons that shot simple metal bullets. Some of their larger weapons seemed to use basic plasma technology, but nothing more advanced than what most species had developed in their early space age. "Their military is equally primitive," Vextar explained. "Kinetic weapons, basic energy beams, and what appears to be some kind of chemical explosive device. They protect themselves with sheets of metal and ceramic. Our smallest patrol ship could destroy their largest battleship without taking damage." Senator Glix of the Trade Federation stood up, her crystal body catching the light beautifully. "Why are we even discussing these humans? They pose no threat to established civilizations. Their technology is centuries behind ours. Let them play with their metal ships in their little corner of space." Dr. Zilani nodded in agreement. "I have completed my full analysis of human capabilities. They have mastered basic fusion power, simple plasma manipulation, and crude space travel. By our standards, they are a Tier 3 developing species. They might become interesting in a few thousand years, but currently they are harmless." The presentation moved to show human colonies. Small domed cities sat on barren worlds connected by simple transportation tubes. The humans inside grew food in basic greenhouses and manufactured goods with primitive 3D printers. Everything looked functional but unimpressive. "They terraform planets by brute force," Vextar continued. "Instead of using atmospheric processors or climate manipulation, they build giant machines that slowly change the air over centuries. Instead of gravity generators, they spin their habitats to create artificial weight. They solve every problem with bigger hammers and more metal." The Cosmic Council's president, an ancient being called the Overmind, spoke for the first time. Its voice echoed strangely as if coming from very far away. "What of their expansion rate?" "The reports suggest they are spreading quickly despite their primitive technology." "True," admitted Vextar. "They reproduce rapidly and seem determined to colonize every rock they can land on. But this is common among young species. They lack the wisdom to understand their limitations. Given time, they will realize they cannot compete with established powers and will accept their place in the galactic community." Ambassador Kelthrix preened his feathers confidently. "The hegemony has dealt with dozens of species like this. They always start aggressive and territorial, thinking their little ships and crude weapons make them important. A simple demonstration of superior force usually convinces them to behave properly. The hall filled with approving sounds from many different species. This was a familiar pattern they had seen before. Young civilizations always thought they were special until they met their betters. Dr. Zilani brought up her final analysis on the great screen. Charts and graphs showed human technology levels compared to other species. In every category, humans ranked near the bottom. Materials science, energy generation, propulsion, weapons, construction techniques, computing power. Humans scored poorly in everything. My recommendation, she said clearly, is to classify humanity as a standard Tier 3 developing species. They should be subject to normal containment protocols. Trade restrictions, territorial limits, technology embargoes. Standard procedure for primitives who might cause trouble if left unmanaged. The vote was quick and unanimous. Every species agreed that humans were not worth serious concern. They were just another young race that would eventually learn their place in the galaxy's established order. As the council session ended, and the aliens began to leave, none of them noticed the small data anomaly in their intelligence reports. Deep in the files about human space activity, there were some strange readings from the outer edges of their solar system. Gravitational fluctuations that didn't match any known phenomena. Energy signatures that appeared and disappeared without explanation. Construction activity detected in areas where no ships had been reported. The hegemony's computers had flagged these readings as sensor errors or natural phenomena. After all, the humans couldn't possibly be building anything important out in the cold emptiness beyond their planets. They could barely construct proper ships in their well-lit shipyards. The idea that they might be working on secret projects in the darkness between worlds was absurd. Admiral Vextar returned to his flagship feeling satisfied with the day's work. The human problem would be solved with a simple show of force. His fleet would travel to their space, demonstrate superior technology, and the primitives would surrender immediately. It would be over in days, maybe hours. He had no way of knowing that in the deep cold of the Sol system's outer reaches, something vast stirred in response to the Galactic Council's decision. Something that had been built in absolute secrecy over centuries of human determination and ingenuity. Something that would prove every assumption the galaxy had made about humanity was terribly, catastrophically wrong. The countdown to first contact had begun, and the galaxy was completely unprepared for what humanity had actually built, in the darkness between the stars. 6 months after the Galactic Council meeting, the Hegemony Warfleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of human territory. 50 massive ships materialized in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with the strange beauty of living metal. Each vessel was a work of art and engineering that most species could never hope to match. At the center of the formation hung the Cosmic Dominion, Admiral Vextar's flagship. The ship stretched over a kilometer from bow to stern, its crystalline core pulsing with enough energy to power a small moon. Weapon ports along its hull could crack planets, and its shields could withstand the direct blast of a star. Vextar stood on his bridge, looking out at the human star system spread before them. It looked exactly as expected. A yellow sun surrounded by primitive planets with the obvious signs of early industrial civilization. Orbital platforms around the third planet, basic mining operations in the asteroid belt, and a few small outposts on the outer worlds. Communications, Vextar ordered. Send the standard ultimatum to the human homeworld. The message that went out was the same one the hegemony had used hundreds of times before. It was polite but firm, offering the humans a chance to surrender peacefully and accept Galactic Council authority. The alternative was complete destruction of their civilization. Lieutenant Zorax, the ship's communications officer, reported the transmission sent. Admiral, we're also detecting approximately 12 human vessels in the system. Nothing larger than what their files classify as a frigate. They appear to be maintaining defensive positions around their homeworld. Vextar smiled, showing his sharp teeth. 12 small ships against 50 capital vessels. The humans were either very brave or very stupid. Probably both. The reply came faster than expected. Instead of the panicked surrender Vextar anticipated, the response was calm and professional. The voice was definitely human, but there was something strange about it. It sounded like multiple people speaking in perfect unison. Hegemony Fleet, this is Deep Construction Authority Control. Your ultimatum is denied. You have entered a restricted construction zone. Please maintain minimum safe distance of 1 million kilometers from all ongoing projects. Failure to comply may result in accidental damage to your vessels. The bridge crew exchanged glances. Deep Construction Authority? That wasn't in any of their intelligence files. And what did they mean by construction zone? Sir, reported the sensor officer, I'm picking up some unusual readings from the asteroid belt. There seems to be more activity there than our intelligence suggested. Vextar moved to examine the sensor displays himself. The readings were odd. Several large asteroids showed heat signatures and electromagnetic activity, but asteroids were just rocks, unless... Could they have mining operations we missed? He wondered aloud. Possible, sir. But the energy signatures are much stronger than normal mining would produce, and some of these asteroids are moving in formations that seem almost coordinated. The Admiral dismissed this concern with a wave of his hand. Humans were primitive, but they weren't stupid. They had probably set up some kind of automated mining system, nothing that could threaten a hegemony fleet. All ships advance to attack formation, Vextar ordered. We'll deal with their little mining operation after we secure their surrender. The fleet began moving deeper into the system, their engines creating beautiful streams of exotic particles. Each ship was surrounded by shields that could deflect any known weapon, and their hulls were made of living metal that could adapt to different types of damage. As they passed through the asteroid belt, Lieutenant Zorax looked up from his station with confusion. Admiral, I'm receiving multiple transmissions from the asteroids themselves. They seem to be talking to each other. That's impossible, Vextar replied automatically. Asteroids don't have communication equipment. Sir, I'm also detecting massive power buildups throughout the belt. These energy readings they're larger than what some of our capital ships produce. Before Vextar could respond, something impossible happened. The asteroids began to move. Not the slow, predictable movement of rocks in orbit, but purposeful, coordinated motion. Dozens of space rocks, some as large as cities, turned toward the approaching fleet and began accelerating. Defensive positions, Vextar shouted, but his crew was already moving. This had to be some kind of trick, some primitive human attempt to use asteroids as weapons. The hegemony ships could easily destroy incoming rocks with their point defense systems. Then the asteroids began to change. What had looked like rough, natural stone surfaces suddenly split open like metal flowers. Hidden inside each asteroid was technology that made no sense. Smooth metal structures unfolded, revealing weapon systems that hurt to look at directly. Strange energy fields began forming around each transformed asteroid, bending space itself in ways that hegemony sensors couldn't properly measure. What are those things? Lieutenant Zorax whispered, staring at his displays in disbelief. The answer came from the human communication system, still speaking in that strange unified voice. Grid Section 7 Alpha activating. Commencing defensive protocols. All units, pattern recognition confirmed. They really don't know what we built out here. The first human weapon fired, and everything Vextar thought he knew about warfare changed forever. It wasn't an energy beam or a missile. The weapon seemed to grab one of his escort ships and simply squeeze it. The vessel's living metal hull, which should have adapted to any attack, began to crystallize and crack. The quantum-bonded armor that protected against antimatter started to break apart at the molecular level. Impossible, Vextar breathed, watching his ship die. Nothing can affect living metal like that. A second weapon fired, and this time Vextar saw what was happening. The humans had somehow learned to control gravity itself. They were creating gravitational fields so intense that matter couldn't hold together normally. The laws of physics weren't being broken, but they were being used in ways that shouldn't be possible. All ships return fire, Vextar commanded, but his weapons seemed pathetically inadequate. His energy beams struck the human asteroid platforms and simply disappeared, absorbed by fields he couldn't understand. His missiles were caught in gravitational wells and crushed before they could detonate. More human weapons revealed themselves. Magnetic field manipulators that treated his ships like toys, tossing them around despite their massive size. Mass drivers that accelerated chunks of matter to significant fractions of light speed. Energy systems that seemed to be powered by controlled pieces of stellar core material. As ship after ship in his fleet was disabled or destroyed, Vextar realized the horrible truth. The intelligence reports had been completely wrong. The humans hadn't built better spaceships. They had built something that made spaceships obsolete. Sir, reported his science officer, voice shaking, long-range sensors are detecting something massive beyond the outer planets. It's larger than anything in our databases. On the main screen, an image appeared that broke Admiral Vexitar's understanding of engineering. Something vast moved in the darkness beyond Pluto. Something so large that his mind struggled to process its scale. It wasn't a ship or a station. It was something entirely new. Something that seemed to exist partially in normal space and partially somewhere else entirely. The unified human voice spoke again, now coming from this impossible construct. We are the Deep Construction Authority. For 3 centuries we have been building in the dark between stars, where your sensors could not see and your arrogance would not let you look. The thing in space moved closer, and Vextar could see it wasn't built from any materials in his databases. It seemed to be made from space itself, from the fundamental forces that held the universe together. We are not your primitives, the voice continued calmly. We are your architects, and you have just discovered what humans can build when no one is watching. The battle was over before Admiral Vextar could truly understand what had happened. Half his fleet drifted powerless in space, their crews alive but their ships completely disabled. The other half had simply vanished, transported somewhere else by technology that shouldn't exist. The cosmic dominion hung motionless, its living metal hull frozen in crystalline patterns that hurt to look at. The ship's AI, which had controlled thousands of functions automatically, was silent. Every weapon was dead. Even the lights flickered weakly. Through his view screen, Vexitar stared at the massive entity that had emerged from the outer darkness. It defied every rule of engineering he had learned in centuries of military service. The thing was larger than most moons, but it moved with impossible grace through space. Its surface seemed to shift and flow like liquid. But instruments showed it was solid. Sometimes it appeared to be made of metal, sometimes of pure energy, and sometimes of something that his sensors couldn't identify at all. The unified human voice spoke again, now coming from inside his own ship somehow. Admiral Vexitar of the Hegemony Navy, you came here to demonstrate superior technology. Instead, you have become our first students. What are you? Vextar asked, his voice barely a whisper. We are what happens when humans spend 300 years building in secret. We are the Deep Construction Authority, and we have been very busy while you were laughing at our crude spaceships. The entity moved closer, and Vextar could see details that made his mind reel. The surface wasn't smooth at all. It was covered in structures and mechanisms that seemed to exist in more dimensions than his eyes could process. Patterns within patterns, all moving and changing according to some vast design. Your intelligence was correct about one thing, the voice continued. Humans do build with hammers and welding torches, but you never asked what we were building. The space around the entity began to change. Stars moved to new positions. Empty regions of space suddenly filled with matter that appeared from nowhere. A barren asteroid became a garden world in moments, complete with atmosphere and growing plants. While your species perfected starships, we built tools to reshape reality itself. While you created better weapons, we learned to manipulate the fundamental forces of the universe. While you conquered planets, we began constructing new ones. Vextar watched in fascination and terror as the demonstration continued. The entity reached across space with invisible hands, gathering matter from distant regions and assembling it into complex structures. A dead star suddenly blazed back to life, repositioned to provide warmth for newly created worlds. Impossible, he breathed. The energy requirements alone, the engineering complexity. No species can do these things. You are correct, the human voice agreed. No single species can, but we didn't build this alone. New images appeared on his view screen, showing the true scope of what humanity had accomplished. The Sol system looked nothing like the primitive industrial area his intelligence had reported. Jupiter was no longer a gas giant. The entire planet had been converted into a massive computing system, its core replaced with quantum processors that operated on a scale beyond imagination. The planet's former mass now served as hardware for an artificial intelligence that could calculate the movement of every atom in a star system. Saturn's rings were revealed to be a particle accelerator, millions of kilometers in diameter, wrapped around exotic matter cores that generated the energy needed to power reality-shaping tools. The beautiful ice and rock that tourists had once admired were actually sophisticated machinery, disguised to look natural. Mars had been hollowed out completely, its interior converted into a single massive factory. Self-replicating construction systems worked constantly inside the planet, building components for projects that spanned solar systems. The red surface was just a shell-hiding industrial capacity that could outproduce entire galactic civilizations. But the crown jewel of our work, the voice said with obvious pride, is what you see before you. We call it the Architect. The moon-sized entity pulsed with inner light, and Vextar felt reality bend around it. Space itself seemed to become more flexible, more willing to accept impossible changes. The Architect wasn't just a machine or a ship. It was a tool for editing the universe itself. The Architect exists partially in your normal space and partially in dimensions your science says cannot be accessed. It treats physical laws not as absolute rules, but as suggestions that can be modified when necessary. Watch. A demonstration began that shattered every assumption Vextar had about what was possible. The Architect reached toward a nearby star system and began to work. Planets moved to more convenient orbits. A dying sun was rejuvenated with matter drawn from elsewhere. Barren worlds suddenly bloomed with life that was created from nothing but raw elements and applied will. Your mistake, the human voice explained, was assuming we wanted to build better spaceships. Why would we need ships when we can simply modify space itself to bring destinations closer? Why build weapons when we can convince matter to behave differently? Why conquer worlds when we can create better ones from scratch? The truth crashed over Vextar like a wave. Humanity hadn't been building conventional technology at all. While the galaxy focused on improving existing concepts, humans had been developing entirely new approaches to engineering. They hadn't just thought outside the box, they had built new boxes that operated by different rules entirely. The asteroid platforms you destroyed our fleet with, he said slowly, working through the implications. Those were just construction equipment? Exactly. Mining tools, mostly. Designed to break apart old matter and reshape it into more useful forms. We're sorry if they seemed aggressive, but when you brought weapons into our construction zone, they automatically switched to defensive mode. Vexitar looked at the readings from his disabled ship and realized the horrible truth. His mighty war fleet had been defeated by what were essentially human construction workers, using their everyday tools as improvised weapons. How long? He asked. How long have you been building these things? The Architect took us about 200 years to complete. The system modifications were mostly finished 50 years ago. We've been working on intergalactic expansion projects for the last decade, but your arrival interrupted that schedule. Intergalactic? Vextar's voice cracked slightly. You're building things in other galaxies? Of course. This galaxy is nice, but it's getting a bit crowded. We thought it would be polite to give everyone more space to work with. The Andromeda project should be ready for colonization in another century or so. The Admiral sat down heavily in his command chair. Everything the Galactic Council thought they knew about humanity was wrong. They weren't a primitive species struggling with basic technology. They were engineers on a scale that made gods look like children playing with toys. What happens now? He asked quietly. The Architect pulsed gently, and Vextar felt his ship's system slowly coming back online. The crystallized hull began to flow back into its normal patterns. Life support stabilized. Even his weapons powered up, though he had no intention of using them again. Now, the human voice said with warmth that seemed genuine, we teach the galaxy what humans can really build, and perhaps you can help us make it even more beautiful. 3 months after the failed invasion, the galaxy was still trying to understand what humanity had revealed. Emergency sessions of the Galactic Council ran continuously as species after species demanded explanations for intelligence failures that now seemed impossibly naive. Dr. Zelani stood before a packed auditorium on Zentari Prime, her 6 eyes focusing on data streams that rewrote everything they thought they knew about human capabilities. Behind her, massive holographic displays showed the true scope of the Deep Construction Authority's projects. We were completely wrong, she admitted to the assembled scientists and diplomats. We measured their ships and counted their weapons, but we failed to understand their minds. While we perfected existing technology, they imagined what we thought was impossible. The first display showed the Sol system as it really existed. Instead of a few primitive colonies orbiting a yellow star, humanity had converted their entire stellar neighborhood into the largest engineering project in galactic history. Jupiter is now a quantum computer with the processing power of 10,000 worlds, Dr. Zelani explained. But calling it a computer doesn't capture what it actually does. This machine can simulate entire universes down to the quantum level. It can predict the behavior of complex systems across millions of years. Most importantly, it can design modifications to reality itself. Gasps echoed through the auditorium as the implications became clear. The Jupiter computer wasn't just powerful. It was smart enough to figure out how to change the fundamental rules that governed matter and energy. The next image showed Saturn, its rings now revealed to be humanity's most ambitious particle physics experiment. This accelerator generates exotic matter states that shouldn't be possible under normal conditions, she continued. They use it to create materials with properties that violate our understanding of chemistry and physics. Some of these materials exist only when observed, others have negative mass, and some seem to exist in several dimensions simultaneously. Ambassador Kelthrix, his feathers dulled with shock, raised a trembling hand. Dr. Zelani, are you saying humans have learned to break the laws of physics? Not break them, she replied carefully. But they've learned to work with laws we didn't know existed. They've discovered that what we call physical laws are actually more like guidelines that can be modified if you understand the underlying principles. The presentation continued with Mars, showing the planet's interior converted into a single massive factory complex. Self-replicating machines worked in chambers the size of cities, building components for projects that spanned star systems. The scale was so vast that it took several minutes just to show one level of the underground manufacturing network. Their construction methods are based on what they call seed technology, Dr. Zelani explained. Instead of building finished products, they create machines that build other machines. Each generation becomes more sophisticated and capable than the last. Given enough time and raw materials, a single human constructor can eventually build anything they can imagine. Senator Glix of the Trade Federation spoke up, her crystal body flickering with nervous energy. How did we miss this? Our intelligence services have been monitoring human space for decades. How could they hide construction on this scale? Dr. Zelani switched to a new display showing long-range sensor data from the outer Sol system. Most of it looked like empty space, but careful analysis revealed the truth. They built everything in the cold darkness between planets where our sensors don't usually look. They also developed stealth technology that makes their constructs appear to be natural phenomena. Those asteroids that destroyed Admiral Vextar's fleet. Our sensors saw them as ordinary space rocks for over 50 years. The audience fell silent as they realized how thoroughly humanity had outmaneuvered the galaxy's intelligence services. For generations, alien observers had been watching human shipyards and industrial centers, completely missing the real construction projects happening in the dark. But their greatest achievement, Dr. Zelani said, bringing up an image that made several audience members gasp in disbelief, is what they call the architect. The holographic display struggled to show the entity properly. It appeared as a shifting, impossible structure that seemed to exist in more dimensions than the projectors could handle. Parts of it faded in and out of visibility as it moved through spaces that shouldn't exist. The architect is not a machine in any sense we understand. It's a tool for editing reality itself. It can manipulate matter at the quantum level across interstellar distances. It can create and destroy fundamental forces. Most remarkably, it can modify the properties of space and time within its area of influence. Captain Morpheus of the Stellar Union waved his tentacles frantically. That's impossible. The energy requirements alone would exceed the output of entire star systems. You're absolutely correct, Dr. Zelani agreed. It is impossible by our understanding of engineering. But humans don't seem to care about our limitations. They've learned to tap into energy sources we never knew existed. Zero-point fluctuations, dimensional barriers, quantum foam. They treat the empty vacuum of space like an unlimited power supply. The presentation showed recordings of the architect at work. Barren star systems transformed into garden paradises in hours. Dead stars rekindled and moved to more convenient positions. Empty space filled with complex structures that appeared from nowhere, fully formed and operational. They don't build things the way we do, she continued. They don't gather materials, design blueprints, and assemble components. Instead, they simply decide what they want to exist and then convince reality to make it happen. It's less like engineering and more like creative writing, but with the laws of physics. A young Catherian scientist near the front raised her wing. Dr. Zelani, what are the implications for galactic civilization? If humans can reshape reality itself, what does that mean for the rest of us? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Dr. Zelani had been dreading this moment, but it was time to face the truth. It means she said slowly. That humanity is no longer just another species sharing the galaxy with us. They have become something entirely new. They are to us what we are to primitive microbes. The difference in capability is so vast that normal concepts of competition or conflict become meaningless. The auditorium erupted in worried conversations. Some species talked about surrender, others about finding ways to compete with impossible human technology. A few suggested trying to destroy humanity before they became even more powerful. Dr. Zilani raised her voice to restore order. But there is one more thing you need to know. The humans have made contact with several worlds already, and their intentions appear to be benevolent. They're not conquerors or destroyers. They seem genuinely interested in helping other species solve problems that our conventional technology cannot handle. She brought up reports from 3 different star systems where humanity had intervened to help. A Vorthon world dying from industrial pollution had been cleaned and restored in days. A hegemony colony threatened by stellar collapse had been saved when humans simply moved their star to a safer location. An entire species had been rescued from extinction when human engineers designed custom habitats that perfectly met their biological needs. They call it constructive assistance, Dr. Zilani explained. They seem to view the galaxy not as territory to conquer, but as a project to improve. They want to make everything work better, last longer, and be more beautiful. The presentation ended with a simple message that had been received from the Deep Construction Authority just hours before the meeting. To all galactic civilizations, we are your neighbors and we want to help. What would you like to build together? 1 year after first contact, the Galactic Council chambers looked completely different. The crystal spires of Centauri Prime now grew in perfect mathematical spirals that seemed to capture and focus starlight from impossible angles. The building itself had become a work of art that changed throughout the day, its walls shifting colors to match the mood of the discussions inside Admiral. Vextar walked through corridors that had been redesigned by human engineers who found the original architecture charmingly inefficient. The floors now generated their own gravity, allowing beings from dozens of different worlds to walk comfortably regardless of their size or biology. The air itself had been modified to carry sound perfectly for every known species, making universal translators unnecessary. He was no longer admiral of a war fleet. That fleet now served as construction crews for projects that made his old military campaign seem like children's games. Today, he was reporting on the progress of humanity's latest gift to the galaxy, a transportation network that would connect every inhabited system through folded space. The Earth Transit project is ahead of schedule, he told the assembled delegates. Human engineers have successfully created stable wormholes between 15 star systems. Travel time between any connected worlds is now measured in minutes rather than years. Senator Glix, whose crystalline form now sparkled with patterns that hadn't existed before human intervention, leaned forward with interest. What are the energy requirements for maintaining these passages through space? Vexter smiled, still amazed by the answer even after months of working with human technology. None. The wormholes are self-sustaining once created. They actually generate more energy than they consume by tapping into the dimensional barriers between normal space and wherever the other end exists. The concept still hurt his brain, but he had learned to accept that human engineering operated by different rules. They didn't just build things that worked. They built things that improved the universe around them simply by existing. Dr. Zilani stood to present her latest research findings. Her 6 eyes now moved independently, a modification that allowed her to study human technology more effectively. The change had been offered freely by the Deep Construction Authority when they learned about her work. I have completed my analysis of human construction methods, she announced. The results are extraordinary. They don't just build individual projects. Every human creation is designed to make future construction easier and more capable. They're not just engineers, they're teaching the universe itself to be more creative. She activated a holographic display showing the latest human project. In a previously empty region of space, humanity had begun constructing what they called a reality workshop, a facility designed to experiment with the fundamental rules that governed physics. They're not satisfied with modifying existing natural laws, she explained. Now they want to create entirely new ones. This facility will test different versions of physics to see which ones produce the most interesting results. The implications were staggering. If humans could create new laws of physics, they could eventually build universes that operated according to any rules they chose. Reality itself would become just another construction material. Ambassador Kelthrix, whose species had ruled space for 10,000 years, now spoke with the humility of someone who had learned just how little he truly understood. Dr. Zilani, what does this mean for species like us? Are we becoming obsolete? Not obsolete, she replied thoughtfully. Different. Humans seem to believe that every species has unique perspectives that can contribute to their projects. They're not trying to replace us, they're trying to help us become better versions of ourselves. As if summoned by the conversation, the familiar unified voice of the Deep Construction Authority filled the chamber. It no longer came from communication devices but seemed to emerge from the air itself. Council members, we have a proposal for your consideration. We would like your help with our next major project. The chamber fell silent. Despite a year of benevolent cooperation, most species still felt nervous when humanity made requests. Their casual approach to impossible tasks made everyone else feel primitive by comparison. We have begun construction of a second galaxy. The voice continued calmly. Andromeda 2 will be designed specifically for multicultural cooperation. We would like each of your species to contribute ideas for how reality should work in this new space. Vextar blinked in disbelief. They were building an entire galaxy. Not colonizing one, not conquering one, but actually constructing one from scratch. And they wanted input from everyone else about how it should operate. The project will take approximately 500 years to complete, the voice explained. During that time, we hope to learn from your cultures, your art, your unique approaches to solving problems. We want Andromeda 2 to be truly collaborative creation. President Overmind, the ancient being who led the council, spoke for the first time in months. Humans of the Deep Construction Authority, your offer is generous beyond measure. But we must ask, why do you need our help? Your capabilities so far exceed ours that our contributions seem insignificant. The air in the chamber seemed to warm with gentle laughter. President Overmind, you misunderstand our capabilities. We can build anything we can imagine, but imagination is not our greatest strength. You have 10,000 different species with 10,000 different ways of seeing the universe. Each of your cultures has discovered beauty and solutions that we never would have thought of alone. A new holographic display appeared, showing preliminary designs for Andromeda 2. But instead of the clean, efficient structures humans usually created, these plans incorporated elements from dozens of alien architectures. Cytherian crystal gardens grew alongside hegemony living metal, while ethereal energy sculptures danced through Vorthon quantum mazes. We can build the framework, the voice continued, but we need you to help us fill it with meaning. What good is a perfect galaxy if it's perfectly boring? The chamber erupted in excited discussions as delegates realized what humanity was offering. Not just transportation to a new galaxy, but the chance to help design one according to their wildest dreams. Every species could contribute their greatest achievements, their most beautiful art, their most interesting ideas about how reality should work. Dr. Zilani raised her voice above the conversations. Are you saying that you want us to help you create new laws of physics for this galaxy? Exactly. We want Andromeda 2 to be a place where Cytherian mathematics can make crystals sing with actual music, where hegemony biology can create truly living starships, where ethereal poetry can reshape space itself. We want to build a universe where every species' greatest dreams can become literally true. As the implications sank in, Vextar realized that humanity had done something even more impressive than building impossible technology. They had solved the fundamental problem that had plagued galactic civilization for millions of years. How to help different species cooperate instead of compete. By making the universe itself expandable and modifiable, humans had eliminated scarcity. There was no longer any need to fight over resources or territory, when you could simply create more of whatever you needed. Every species could have their perfect worlds, their ideal conditions, their greatest dreams made real. The session ended with unanimous agreement to participate in the Andromeda 2 project. As delegates filed out of the chamber, discussing the contributions their species might make, Vextar remained behind to watch the stars through the modified crystal walls. Earth's children were now scattered across dozens of star systems, but they still looked up at night skies that now burned with artificial constellations. Humanity had kept their promise. They hadn't just reached for the stars, they had grabbed them, rearranged them, and built a universe more beautiful than the one they had inherited. In the deepest space between galaxies, construction had already begun on projects that would dwarf even Andromeda 2. The architect and its growing family of reality shaping tools were preparing for humanity's next impossible dream. The galaxy had finally learned what humans could build when no one was watching. But now everyone was watching, and they were all invited to help build what came next.